to welcome everyone to our community forum of critical race theory. My name is Bill Allen. I am the president of Pennsylvania Election Integrity, and I want to thank everyone that's helped to put this function on. And what we're going to do tonight, we have everyone got the schedule. All right. The first thing we do is we open up here the presentation of PI introduction, moderated by me. And then we're going to have the overview format by Beverly. She's going to be the moderator for tonight. Our first speaker is going to be Jarrett Coleman. He's running for Parkland School District, and he's been filing stuff against Parkland School District, trying to get them to provide the information about what they're teaching the critical race theory, and he's going to go over that. Our second speaker is Simon Campbell, which I personally got to hear speak, and he's a real exciting speaker. I mean, when you hear him, you're going to understand why he was asked to come here tonight. And then we're going to have questions from the audience, okay, after they're done speaking, and they will both be up here to answer them questions. I think, Beverly, you said you're going to have people fill out questions. Okay, she'll explain that to you, okay? And then after that, Beverly's going to come back up. She got some announcements she wants to go over. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk about future plans and the business group added instructions may be given at this time, okay? All right, so Pennsylvania election integrity, everyone got a trifold? All right, it's basically what it is it's basically dealing with people say we're going to deal with the election. Demand a full forensic audit for 2020, all right? That takes time. That takes people getting together. We have some petitions there for people to sign. All right, and get your friends to sign these petitions. Get them back and get them to the senators. There's 4 senators, all right, that they need to go to. And that's why I say contact your state senator, state representative, demand a full forensic audit of the election. We cannot move forward without a forensic audit of 2020. Require voter ID in person. Eliminate digital voting, minimize mail-in ballots, eliminate drop boxes, restore paper ballots, and repeal Act 77. Has to happen. The preset projects educate citizens of Pennsylvania on how to get involved in their local office and let wishes be heard in their local community, and critical step restoring our election processes, having trusted officials on local level. Positions such as judge of elections are critical to election integrity. Recruit and support candidates for your county commissioners. Recruit and support candidates for city, boroughs, township councils. Recruit and support candidates for local school boards. Educate parents and community members to restore the educational system as an educational center, not an indoctrination center. Stop the critical race theory. Educate the public and organize the parents. Communicate with other local organizations within the state to work together. Host an annual conference with other local organizations within the state so we can maintain election integrity within our state. We need your support. We need one another. Think nationally, act locally, and basically what we're doing, we formed this here to take action. We do not want to sit by idly. We want to take action. We want to get the job done, and we need people to do that. We need people out there working together, not working against one another. The difference is when you work against one another, you fail. This is not about competition. This is about to succeed. There's not one of us, I believe, that are here tonight that not thinking about what happened, where we're at, and how we got there. And that's why we got 2 great speakers tonight, okay, for this purpose. And I want to thank you for coming, and I appreciate you. And if you didn't sign up, please get signed in, and I'll talk about that later about what's the reason for the signatures. Thank you. Beverly?
Good evening. I'm so glad everybody could make it here. This is our first forum, our first event. We're really excited. I expected standing room only, and I got you wonderful people. So your job is to go out and tell others what we're doing. My name is Beverly Hernandez. I've worked with other organizations. I'm now working for Pennsylvania effort, okay? And Debbie Vero, Cheryl Gerkovich, Barbara Walters, Judy Lohner, and Debbie, what's your last name? I just met Debbie, and she was that willing to help us out, so we're not letting Debbie go. Okay, so do we have any school board candidates and school board officials here that would stand up? Ethan Haverhill. Anybody else? Is it Doug?
Rudy Schellenberger.
Rudy Schellenberger. What are you running?
The school board in the Nazareth School District.
Nazareth School District. And Ethan, you're running for? Penn Arjun, you're already on the board. Okay. These two guys are going to help us get over the finish line that we're trying to get over. Okay. Is there any other candidates here that I'm not seeing? Ooh, they would have had a good crowd to meet up with. Okay, on the table over there, there's all kinds of information on Republican candidates and things that you might be interested in. As you leave, you might want to take some of those signs in the back. We couldn't get them all here, but it's a bit. Lee Snover, who is the head of the Republican Party, has a little bit of information that I think is good to hear. If you would come up and give us that.
Hello, how are you? For those who don't know me, my name is Lee. My last name is Snover. I'm the chairman of the Northampton County Republican Committee. I'm highly partisan. I make no apologies for that. I'm a chairman and I'm a big cheerleader for the Republican Party. So what I want to tell you a little bit about tonight is your statewide races for judge candidates. So what happens in a statewide judge race? People think, well, I don't know the candidate. I never met them. I don't feel comfortable voting for them. That's complete nonsense. Pull that Republican lever for our judges. The Democrats do it. They don't think like that. We need to stop thinking like that because judges matter. Didn't we find out after the election in 2020? Here's what we thought. Well, it'll go to the courts and it'll turn out all right. And what did we find out? Not so much, okay? They're highly Democrat partisan in Pennsylvania, the courts are. They didn't want to take the cases. They ruled on technicalities. We had nowhere to go, so judges matter. So let me tell you about the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. We have one candidate running for one spot. His name is Kevin Brobson. He is a Republican rock star. Currently, Kevin Brobson is the president of the Commonwealth Court in Pennsylvania, and he's running for the Supreme Court. You will never, while he's on a court, have to worry about how he's going to rule. His rulings are always going to be conservative. Just this week, he had a ruling that a lawsuit can go forward to decertify the machines in Northampton County. That was an extremely controversial ruling considering he's on the ballot for the Supreme Court, but he did the right thing. He didn't do any politics. He did exactly what he thought, that the machines needed to be looked at. So he had that ruling. So that's a candidate I really want you to remember when you go out on November 2nd. Do not forget, we need that Supreme Court spot with Kevin Brobson. We have other candidates, 2 for Commonwealth Court and 1 for Superior Court. Let's see, we have Meg Sullivan for Superior Court. We have Stacey Wallace for Commonwealth Court and Judge Crompton. He's already a judge. But as you can tell, I'm a little bit excited about Kevin Brobson. Let's get him elected. Yes?
Just real quick, if people want to write down Lehigh County GOP, what's nice is they have a great cheat sheet. So
yeah, we have that too. If you go to our website, Northampton County GOP, it links to the statewide, and it has all the judges
And
and
you're
all the
allowed to
information.
print that out and take that with you.
Yes.
Just, some people don't know that.
Okay. Yep. So that's just all I wanted to talk about, is remind you that judges matter. We tend to like glaze over when it becomes to the statewide races and don't give them any attention, but it's very important. And I just said the other night, and I really appreciate you guys coming out. I mean, really, this is so important. We're in such trying times, and I've been telling people, we are no longer we the people. We are now be the people. It's up to you. Get to school board, get to county council, get to your township, and be the people. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Lee. So real quick, we're going to have our speakers speak, and then we're going to go to questions. The way we're going to do questions is these three ladies will be standing, and raise your hand if you have a question, and they will pass you a pencil and paper, and then they will pick it up, and we will ask those questions. So would you please quiet your phones also? And tonight we have a very important, engaging presentation for you by two men who are actually on the battlefield. They're going to show you how pernicious and racist critical race theory actually is. Our first speaker is Jarrett Coleman. He's a candidate for Parkland School Board. He believes that parents should have 100% say in their children's education. He also may be against masks on children in school, I'm not sure. The second speaker is Simon Campbell. I'll introduce him in a bit. He's nationally known. So it's, the floor is yours, Jarrett.
I can try to go without it. I'll just go without it. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Okay, I'll go without it. All right, so I will begin. My name is Jarrett Coleman. I'm a Republican candidate, a not cross-filed candidate for Parkland School Board, and I have some troubling news to share with all of you tonight. It brings me no joy to share what I'm about to share with you. I feel betrayed that this has all happened under the current school board, and I'm deeply concerned for the future for my children. I went K through 12 to Parkland. I graduated. I went and finished my flight training at Lehigh Parkland Community College. I then went on to finish my bachelor's degree, got my MBA, and I'm an airline pilot by trade. I moved back to put my kids through the same school district that I had a great experience in, and that was one where I was taught to be a critical thinker, and now an education where politics stopped at the threshold of the door. And as we've seen now, politics are permeating the threshold of the door, and it's inappropriate and irresponsible. And what I'm going to do is just let you know about our findings, what we're finding as we're digging. We've retained counsel, and we're filing right-to-know requests with Parkland School District, appealing them with the state and trying to expose what's going on in Parkland School District. So I will go ahead and begin here. So I like to title this Reforming Parkland's Equity and Inclusion Plan. This was developed with me as well as other parents in the districts in Parkland School District that were trying to find out what exactly was going on. All right, ready? So, Parkland's Equity and Inclusion Plan has been used as a Trojan horse to implement critical theory, otherwise known as critical Marxism, under the guise of social justice. Do not make a mistake and think that it is not in the schools, because it is. And I will show you examples of where it is. So
I'm not picking the screen up.
The Equity and Inclusion Plan is largely based around the premise that there is systemic racism in the United States, and that whites, males, heterosexuals have existential biases that need to be examined. I'm not making this up, they put it in the newspaper. Let's continue. Faculty and students were provided with resources to, quote, give them perspective about CRT and how the country's achievements were a function of capitalistic and racial oppression. I'm not making it up. They put this in their own equity and resource list, and I'll go ahead and I'll show you some of that. Next slide, please. So gender is now being defined as not a biological fact, but a personal preference. Sorry, males will not be prevented from participating in girls' sports, nor from going into girls' bathrooms, locker rooms if they identify as a female. Members of the Equity and Inclusion Community Forum were asked to provide their preferred pronouns upon joining. Again, they put it in the Parkland Press this time. I'm simply just telling you what's going on. It's all out there for you to see if you care to look at it. The next page, please. The merit will no longer be used as the exclusive criteria for hiring decisions. Parkland will give non-whites, specifically teachers of color, preference when hiring faculty. This was released in the community forum. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's begin here. I get a lot of Democrats accosting me on social media saying, oh, where's the CRT in Parkland? I went on the website, I can't find the CRT. Well, don't be naive. They're not going to label where it is. It's ingrained in a fundamental framework, as I will show you how they're incorporating it. The Parkland is not teaching a class called CRT 101, but what they're doing is they're weaponizing the curriculum and books and resources to be a vehicle to teach Marxism and CRT. But just so we're on the same page, critical race theory is a subset of neo-Marxist critical theory, also known as cultural Marxism, that believes that all white people are born members of a systemically oppressive class that uses its hegemonic power to dominate other races, especially but not limited to blacks, and impose its values and culture onto them in order to keep them perpetually subjugated.'t slide, please. Some buzzwords that we should refresh ourselves with. White, male, gender, Christian privilege, cultural appropriation, false consciousness, microaggressions, anti-racism, the work of Ibram Kendi, and intersectionality, the work of Kimberly Crenshaw, self-proclaimed CRT scholar. Don't worry, we have plenty more from her tonight. And systemic racism. Next slide, please. So, these are our important actors in Parkland School District right now. We have Ken Shelton. He is Parkland's, quote, thought partner. Our thought partner at Parkland. Mark Madsen, new superintendent, brought on property July 1st, 2021. Kelly Rosario, director of curriculum school district. Brenda Dorenzo, director of student services. Nicole McGallis, director of community relations and development. And Parkland School Board. Next slide, please. The school district, I have brought to their attention, parents have brought to their attention time and time again what they're doing, and they refuse to acknowledge it. In fact, the prior superintendent, quote, we do not teach and will not teach critical race theory. This was from Dean Pine, president of the board. Richard Snizak was this former superintendent. In an email to a parent, he explained he doesn't really know what critical race theory is. He has to do some research. By this time, it was too late. The Parkland administration has told him on numerous occasions it's not teaching critical race theory. Remember, there's no critical race theory here, folks. Next slide, please. So, what's happened already? The bad news is that Parkland School District hired Ken Shelton as their thought partner. Ken Shelton was paid $15,000 via an idea grant for his services as his thought partner on the topics of race, privilege, bias, and equity. Again, no CRT here. The source, again, I'm not making it up, we pull it right from the Parkland Press. They published it themselves. They were telling us they were doing it the whole time. Ken has been working directly and in person with Parkland students and administration since March 2020. Ken provided the ideological framework for the Equity and Inclusion Plan and ran the meeting. Folks, they met him at a symposium in Lehigh University. We are quite certain they brought a few representatives from the school, went to the symposium. They liked the idea. They thought it sounded great to have an equity and inclusion plan. They brought it back to the school. And when they brought the puppy home, it began to bite the baby. And they can't return it. So all they can do now is deflect and try to put lipstick on this baby. So this is Ken Shelton. This is our thought partner that Parkland School District wants to show us. Next slide, please. This is Ken Shelton on his Twitter page. Different Ken Shelton. On Ken Shelton's Twitter page, he was not a social justice warrior until George Floyd was murdered. He had no diversity, equity, and inclusion training. He was not providing services to school until George Floyd was murdered on his Twitter page. It was all about strategy. Next slide, please. So Parkland, under the advice of Ken Shelton, decided to post an anti-racism and equity resource guide. These resources were posted on the official Parkland website for faculty, equity, and inclusion members, and students, among others, to, quote, identify their inherent biases. We'll talk about that as well. The Parkland administration has refused to identify who approved posting this list or what criteria was used to vet these resources prior to doing so. Well, let's look at some of the source. Let's look at some of the material. Next slide, please. This was one of the books that was on the list. This was from Toni Morrison from Parkland's Anti-Racism and Equity Resources List. Quote, on election day, how eagerly so many white voters, both the poorly educated and the well-educated, embraced the shame and fear sowed by Donald Trump. William Faulkner understood this better than almost any other American writer in Absalom, Absalom. Incest is less a taboo for an upper-class Southern family than acknowledging the one drop of black blood that would clearly soil the family line. Rather than lose its whiteness, once again, the family chooses murder. There's a photo, again, this was all included in the resource list. Next slide, please. Here we have Intersectionality Matters. This is a podcast hosted by Kimberly Crenshaw. She's an American civil rights advocate and a leading scholar of critical race theory. She is a self-proclaimed leading scholar on critical race theory. Was in this as well. We have Black Lives Matter here, and quote, implicit bias and just outright racism is embedded in the way that policing is done in this nation. And when you think about it, historically it was founded as a slave patrol. This was the message we were sending out in Parkland School District. Next page, please. Okay, here's a good one. How to be an anti-racist by Ibram Kendi. Quote, capitalism is essentially racism. Racism is essentially capitalism. They were birthed together from the same unnatural causes, and listen to this, everyone. They shall all die together one day from unnatural causes. How to be an anti-racist, Ibram Kendi. Next slide here, we have white fragility. Robin DiAngelo. Quote, white people raised in Western society are conditioned into a white supremacist worldview because it is the bedrock of our society and its institutions. Regardless of whether a parent told you that everything was equal, the ubiquitous socializing power of white supremacy cannot be avoided. Next slide, please. This is crazy. It's almost as if the material wasn't vetted. Well, guess what the school district said when parents started asking, how did these sources came up? Nicole Mcauliffe replies back from Parkland School District, quote, there was so much information coming into school districts at large about the general, quote, equity and inclusion topic last summer that I started compiling a list in a Word document and was not citing where they were coming from because the list was just a compilation of materials from various places. It was totally voluntary for people to read, watch, listen to the items and to submit new items throughout the year. And then she goes on. Nothing was, quote, vetted before sharing. After all, none of us are experts in this field. Next slide. So, one back, please. So, one there. So what's happened already? So parents were rightly upset, and they began, they organized and submitted comments and phone calls prior to the April 22nd Equity and Inclusion Community Forum condemning the Equity and Inclusion Program's toxicity, especially the resource list, and demanded black equality-minded academics resource be used in their places. They supplied the materials to this committee, and not one dissenting comment was read aloud in the community forum. You were not allowed to challenge any of the narrative. Parkland subsequently removed the resource list from its website. So it's gone now. It's gone. Supposedly so it could reform to include alternative viewpoints. When provided with the requested black-authored equality-minded resources, they did an about-face and refused to post or share them with the faculty. Next slide, please. What else has already happened? Well, Dr. Jessica Shocker, she's homegrown, she's close. We talk about homegrown. She is in Pennsylvania, Berks County. She was given a Library of Congress grant to teach CRT at Penn State Berks. Okay, she does professional development for teachers, and she offered her services to Parkland's administration at the E&I community meetings. Rather than decline these invitations, Parkland's director of curriculum forwarded the event to Parkland staff. Next slide, please. Thus far, we know that 3 teachers attended her initial indoctrination. We're working on getting the list, and we will work to expose who those teachers are and what else they were being taught. Teachers can be found thanking the administration for helping them with, quote, creating a culture of equity and identifying inherent biases on Parkland's website still to this day. Per Parkland's administration, Dr. Shocker has offered her services to multiple districts in the Lehigh Valley. When Parkland was provided with Black-authored, non-CRT inspired resources for the faculty's professional development, they refused to share these. Next slide, please. Okay, so a core tenet of CRT posits that racism is so deeply entrenched that it is not abnormal, rather that it has become the norm. It emphasizes that often racism does not happen in explicit forms. Rather, it is more nuanced and subtle and built into our structures. It emphasizes that often racism is not explicit or easy to spot and point out. Racism is not just slurs and abuse hurled in the street. Rather, racism is built into our structures and institutions, which is why we see system-level disparities between races. Unconscious bias training is grounded in CRT. As racism is so embedded in society, it also permeates our ideas, thinking, and influences our actions. There's no CRT here. We have a teacher on their website going through unconscious bias training. Her quote from her in the video is, "This cohort has done an excellent job highlighting the unintentional biases that I have along with everyone else, and how those biases affect how I teach. We learned strategies on how to combat these biases." Quote, "Ken Shelton has done a wonderful job leading us," but there's no CRT here, folks. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, I wish it could say it was just the school district. I wish it could be the elected officials that were making that decision. But we've now found out that the Parkland Education Foundation, the nonprofit organization that's being funded by some of the largest companies in the Lehigh Valley, is involved in sowing division in our schools. This is the Parkland Education Foundation's website. And next slide, please. In the center of the website, they have this statement: "The foundation believes strongly that education and understanding are at the heart of progress. In light of that, and in response to the injustice that broke America's heart over the past few weeks as we reflected on George Floyd's death, the Parkland Education Foundation will be purchasing $2,800 worth of books that explore the history of racism in America. Confronts its current state and addresses how we can move forward with real change to treat all racial groups as equal." The donors to the Parkland School District Foundation are being told this isn't going on. The parents are being told it's not going on, but we can see it. So we put an information request to find out what books did they buy with the money. Next slide, please. So we got a list of a bunch of books. I mean, let's skip. This is the elementary school books. One more slide, please. This is a high school book list, and we found one. Yes, no, maybe. So I mean, it's not about. This isn't about. Has anything to do with CRT, but it's a love story about two children that meet as they're shocked with the election of Donald Trump because he's a racist and a bigot, and that's in a classroom. There are no books on Joe Biden or on Barack Obama, but there's books being purchased about Donald Trump and shaming conservative students. When a librarian did a review of the book, she said it would be concerning to conservative students. Very politically motivated, but we bought some of those. Next slide, please. This book, though, caught my attention. It's called Piecing Me Together. It's written by Renee Watson, and I pulled up, me and some other parents pulled up a discussion guide that was created by the publisher to further discussions that the book exposes, topics the book brings up. On this guide, next page, please. Well, actually, we can just, let's look, yeah, so this is good. Piecing Me Together, a discussion guide about race, class, gender, and intersectionality. Kimberly Crenshaw termed intersectionality. She's a CRT scholar, but there is no CRT here. While you may have explored race, class, and gender identity through other novels, Piecing Me Together allows us to have a unique and in-depth conversation about intersectionality. The book is a vehicle for us to have discussions about a topic that was created by a critical race theory scholar, but there's no CRT here. Next slide, please. This was an interesting table I found on the next slide. It's explaining to the teachers to explain which groups have more privilege and power and which are non-dominant with less access to power and privilege. Next slide, please. As you are all, I'm sure, aware.
Went too far.
Freaking Merrick Garland's hacking me. Sorry for the delay. Okay, so we're back to this slide. Okay, so as you're all aware, the dominant and privileged race are the whites. The marginalized groups are people of color, Native Americans. This is interesting. The dominant religion is Protestants, and the marginalized and disadvantaged and less privileged groups is simply everyone else. Everyone else. Everyone else. Yep. Next slide, please. I think we might just go down. So what happens next? Curriculum changes. So Parkland will be making changes to the social studies and English curriculum as to ensure inclusion of multicultural perspectives. Again, this is in the Parkland press. The new textbooks have been ordered. Equity versus equality appear to be a topic in one of them. Make no mistake, equity is a direct threat to diversity. Officially, recommendations are made by the Equity and Inclusion Community Committee while working in conjunction with the administration. Equity and inclusion officers will be added to all Parkland schools K through 12 beginning the 2021 and 2022 school year. Next slide, please. Okay, the Equity and Inclusion Plan is a document that Parkland releases. They have it on their website. It's a very confusing format. It looks like this. And as you go through it, it's broken down by goals based on curriculum and other metrics throughout the district. It's very hard to read, so me and some parents decided it would be smart to just lay this out in chronological order to show what's been done from the beginning to the end to really show us what's taking place. So next slide, please. So let's look at some of our action steps. In fall of 2020, we began to capture diversity of students and staff involved in school activities, arts, and athletics. How did they capture the diversity of your children in the school? Southern Lehigh just admitted that they accidentally sold that information out of the school district. Right? I think they just put that in the paper. You'll have to check with the slate over in Southern Lehigh. They have more information about that. So how are they playing? What were they doing in Parkland? The next slide, please. Develop a cohort of professional staff with representation across all schools to take part in ongoing PD aligned to equity and inclusion. Evidence of success here is a cohort with upcoming meetings outlined. Again, we want to know who these professional development groups are and what they're talking about. Next slide, please. Backwards plans starting with 2020 and draft major events to be added into the curriculum and revised content across Parkland School District social studies courses. Evidence of success is identified content focusing on contemporary issues that need to be added to the curriculum. Remember this, adding contemporary issues and looking at history through a lens of race. Just remember this, please. Next slide, please. Audit curriculum K through 12. Evidence of success K through 12 audit completed with multiple culture perspectives. Next slide, please. Reviews resources that support curricular changes. Evidence of success, committee reviews and provides feedback on curricular resources. Next slide, please. Action steps. Secure consultants and resources to deliver planned professional development. Okay, they had to get a budget approval. The board knew about it. They're just not looking. They're not paying attention and they're not fit for their positions. Evidence of success is a contract with professional development providers. Next slide, please. Involve stakeholders such as teachers, students in Parkland High School to student job fair in order to increase interest in the education field. In addition, brainstorm additional ways to promote education to our diverse student population. And then they write, build the pipeline. Bottom is a job fair that's inclusive and diverse in faculty and students in Parkland School District. Next slide, please. Curricular plans that include contemporary issues from multiple cultural perspectives. It ensures time is allotted in the school year. Your evidence of success in August of this past year was a final curriculum document, proposed purchase to school board, professional development plan for a new rollout of curriculum and resources. Next slide, please. Okay. Review of StudySync, Newsella, and other resources that identify current content available and supports. We need documents to support these contemporary issues if we're going to change things. Review of modern novels that shed light on multiple perspectives. Okay? Proposed novel lists that outline the content of PSD's curricular courses. Next slide, please. Okay, this is interesting. Implement character counts in the high school, essentials at the middle school level, and continue with scripts at middle school and elementary. Add class chats regarding empathy, SEL, and resiliency. Continue with Mind Up at elementary. Well, me and some parents, we didn't know what this was, and when you start looking at this, this was not something that was drafted overnight. This is well thought out. This did not just come into our classrooms a year ago. This has been a long time in the making. So this is a very well laid out plan. They have done their homework to do this. So we started doing some research on what SEL was, social emotional learning, it's called. And I would like to go over some information that I had found. Next slide, please. So this is our Mind Up program. It's a program that teaches a bunch of things to the school district, but most importantly, it teaches social and emotional learning. Goldie Hawn is the one that's the founder of the program. So I'm not going to sit here and go over a ton of detail about social emotional learning. We could spend a lot of time on it. In fact, I have presentations that will go into this very high level, and I would be happy to show all of you at a later time. What I'm going to do is show you briefly how social emotional learning is a vehicle for implementing cultural Marxism and critical race theory in our schools. Okay, next slide, please. So here's Goldie Hawn. Next slide, please. So here is what they're teaching. We are teaching social emotional learning. One more. And let's go down one more slide here. CASEL, recognized as a CASEL Select program. So Mind Up is guided by the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, CASEL, which uses SEL as a vehicle for critical race theory and to train vulnerable students into becoming social justice activists. CASEL labels the Mind Up program, as a select program. This is among the highest rating that CASEL provides to a program. The Idaho Freedom Foundation did a great job when it said the following. In June 2020, the webinar titled SEL as a Lever for Equity and Social Justice, CASEL's president and CEO advocated that SEL should be used to favor certain students over others primarily because of their race. The CEO of CASEL then continued to say, we see social emotional learning as a tool for anti-racism. Does anyone remember the term anti-racism? Ibram Kendi. Okay, anti-racism, remember, this has been used as a bludgeon to destroy anyone or anything that disagrees with progressive dogma. The term was coined by Ibram Kendi, and the idea that racism is a white problem. As American Enterprise Institute scholar Frederick Hess explains, much of what passes for anti-racist education is a poisonous exercise in caricature and rank bigotry. What anti-racists mean by education is something more typically understood as indoctrination. Many administrators are likely unaware of the uninformed about the underlying agenda of SEL. CASEL, however, is blunt about it. Transformative goals, and supposedly believes that parents and well-meaning public officials will be too stupid or too afraid to eject. But now the wool has been removed from parents and officials' eyes. They should purify their schools of this indoctrination. Teachers need to go back to doing their core jobs. Social emotional learning curriculum must be expunged from school. If public officials continue pretending like this indoctrination is good for your kids, parents must remove their kids from this public school district before further damage is done. Next slide, please. Today, I have shown you resources that were provided to Parkland students that are written by CRT scholars, vehicles for discussion on topics by CRT scholars in the form of books, and vehicles for teaching CRT in the form of social emotional learning. All of this is encapsulated in the Equity and Inclusion Plan at Parkland as developed by Ken Shelton. But don't take my word for it, let's just listen to what Ken said. Ken has a podcast, our thought partner has a podcast. Ken Shelton calls his podcast The Liberated Educator. This is his podcast titled Critical Race Theory Podcast and Training Day. In this he says this. He says, in a lot of dialogue, the prevailing social dialogue here, all of these things railing against CRT, when one, they can't define what it is. Two, it's not explicitly taught as a thing in school, but rather, well, it's part of a framework, of an intellectual framework that has certain tenets applied to it, and in its simplistic terms as possible, it basically means you are looking at both our systems and institutions in a contemporary and social historical perspective through a lens of race. Next slide, please. What we can do, Simon's going to talk to you a lot about this. He's going to give you some solutions on what we can do, but one more slide, please. What you can do to help me. Let's make Parkland a shining city on a hill, and let's show everyone how we can go in and modify the equity and inclusion plan. Go to my website, colemanforparkland.com. We've spent over $13,000 in a school board race now, trying to expose what they're doing. I need your help. You need to, if you can please go onto my website and donate or write me a check, help me expose it so I can help you help yourselves. Because Parkland brags about everything they do, but they're hiding all this. We need to expose it. Help me make an example out of Parkland so you all can do the same afterwards. Ranting on Facebook will accomplish nothing. You will not win. It is not possible to argue with these people. So don't waste your time. House Bill 1532, we need to get it out of the Education Committee. It's in Curtis Sunni's desk. You need to call him and get it out of committee. If they put that into place right now, Parkland School District violates the law because they're teaching unconscious bias training. It's prohibited by the bill. Call Curtis Sunni, tell him to make it in the law. But I need your help financially. I need you to give whatever you can so we can make Parkland an example here. And finally, I'd like to close with this. This was sent to me from a parent who was so upset with what's going on, they decided to start homeschooling their children. And it's from a homeschooling website, but I thought the information was very important. Former governor and current gubernatorial candidate Terry Mcauliffe was asked why he voted for a bill that would have given parents input into the resources available to their children in school libraries. This is how he responds. I'm not going to let parents come into schools and actually take books out and make their own decisions. I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach. Well, you are wrong. Listen, as responsible adults, as citizens and parents, it is our obligation to remind our elected representatives that they represent us and not the other way around. It is we the people who are in charge, and it is we the parents who know what is best for our children, not them. Thank you very much.
Very nice job, Jarrett. There's so much information, so much to take in. It's just amazing. Our second speaker is Simon Campbell, former school board member who has captured national attention. He's here to teach us ways to protect our children and grandchildren against these violations. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much. It's always a very, very pleasant drive coming up here. I live in Yardley in Bucks County, and the way the GPS takes you through all the winding country lanes, and I'm like, am I going to make it tonight? I always do, so I appreciate coming up here. I do enjoy the scenery. For those of you that I've not sort of seen before, you can tell from my accent, I was born and raised in Louisiana, so I appreciate you putting up with that. I actually have a question for you. How many Americans are in the room? Can I see a show of hands? Isn't that great? I'm an American too these days. It's fantastic, isn't it? Yes. I'm a naturalized United States citizen. Thank you. You can clap. It's fine. I take applause happily. Yeah, January 2009, I was naturalized, and that day in Philadelphia, there was about 60 of us from over 30 different countries, all being sworn in. The final thing is when you swear in. And it's a really interesting experience going through the naturalization process. I don't just mean the legal background stuff, I mean the ceremony, when you finally get your certificate. That day, I looked around the room, and many of the immigrants in that room had tears in their eyes. And the family members of that, it even gets me to this day when I think about it, because it's like, you know, for me, coming from England, yes, I'm from England originally, you know, Becoming American is sort of like getting a second passport, but for many folks that have come from these, piss-poor countries, tyrants, and they finally go through the legal process to become American, it's a very touching experience. And they give you this book of quotes from former presidents as part of the ceremony, and I always remember the one from Reagan, and I'm paraphrasing here. Reagan said something like, "You can move to France, but you'll never become a Frenchman. You can move to Italy, but you'll never become an Italian." He said that anyone from any corner of the world can move to America and become an American. And it really always stayed with me, that, because this country, more than anything else, isn't about your skin color. It isn't about your ethnic background, where you're from. It's about an idea. And the idea is freedom. And if you believe in freedom, there is no more welcoming country in the world than this country. So this is true. This is absolutely true. And whenever I get asked to speak, and it's usually on CRT or something like that these days, I always go to the higher level, in the sense that the biggest threat that this country faces today from the radical left is the all-out assault on the First Amendment to the US Constitution. And I'm going to explain exactly what I mean by that, because the radical left have stolen the English language. And coming from England, as an American, I'm here to steal it back. I have had it with the way that they speak. I have had it with the way that they demonize and attack. If I step into the shoes of the radical left right now, into character, all of you are racists, all of you. You all hate black people and want to put them down, and you should all be ashamed of yourselves for opposing diversity and inclusion. All of you. That's the left. Is this not true? Isn't this exactly what they say to anyone that opposes their agenda? They seek to demonize, they seek to attack, they call you racist. In my school district, Pennsbury, in Bucks County, some of you may have seen the news. I was at, yes, it's true, I was at national news a few months ago. I spoke at public comment in my local school district, opposed to the censorship that was taking place. We had in my school district an unbelievable situation where parents and taxpayers, opposed to, I won't call it critical race theory, because that's not what I call it. I call it the taxpayer-funded political indoctrination program, because that's what it is. Was speaking against it, and the school district, including the school solicitor, was saying things like, "You're done, be quiet, sit down, you're not allowed to speak," at public comment when they were speaking peacefully against the policy. That is a violation of the First Amendment, okay? Well, you have the right as a citizen, to speak against any public policy of your choice at a government meeting, or anywhere else for that matter. And when the government themselves, the school board, by and through the solicitor, will literally say to citizens, "Shut up, sit down." Well, we've now filed a federal lawsuit against Pennsbury School District. So, every single one of the school board directors has been sued, the two solicitors have been sued, the director of the political indoctrination program, she's been sued. We've had it. We've had it. Had it with the idea that they get to control the discussion, because critical race theory is a public policy debate, right? There are those on the radical left that believe one thing, and all the normal people, the rest of us, believe something else. But it's almost like, imagine there's a debate in the room behind that door, and instead of getting in there and having your voice heard, there's a thug on the door that says, "You're not allowed even in the room to have your voice heard." And that thug is government officials. Or the radical left, same thing in many cases. And that is the biggest threat that we all face, is the fact that they're trying to silence and intimidate people into not opposing what they're doing. And so I take the view that I don't speak the way that they want me to speak. And I encourage all of you to not speak the way that they want you to speak. I spoke about a month or two ago, someone in the audience asked me, he said, "Simon, how do you deal with the fact that, that their side says things like, why are you opposed to diversity, equity, and inclusion?" And my response was, "I don't know what that is. That doesn't exist. It does not exist." I said, "I don't care what goes in someone's job title in a school district. It is a taxpayer-funded, race-baiting, political indoctrination program, period. That's what it is. So when you ask me, how do I'm opposed to that, I don't know what you're talking about. This is what this is. How many of you heard the news when the National School Boards Association wrote to Joe Biden and said we want the federal stormtroopers to come and investigate parents? Did you see that news?
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. I actually read the letter. Did some of you read the letter that NSBA wrote to Biden? In that letter, they were saying stuff like what we heard before. There is no critical race theory in school districts. It's all propaganda, it's made up. And then they go on to say, and therefore can you get the FBI to investigate parents, right? What was striking to me was that very point, when they were literally saying, we don't want anyone else who opposes what we're doing to even call it critical race theory, called X, right? It has to be called this, it has to be called equity. And this attitude is what I'm coming from, because that attitude was in play in my school district in Pensbury. One of the speakers that tried to speak and was silenced and shut down was told by the school board vice president, excuse me, because he said the words critical race theory, and the vice president said, excuse me, interrupts him. That's not what it's called. It's not what it's called. It's called equity. Then the school solicitor says, yeah, if you don't call it what we say it is, then your comments are irrelevant and we're shutting off the microphone. That attitude was in play with the NSBA, the school boards, the National School Boards Association. It's a good thing I wasn't at the May meeting when this happened, because I would have been like, what are you, my mother? You're the governor. You don't have to tell me how I speak to you. You're the governor. I'll call it whatever the hell I want to call it. I'll call it the complete and utter load of crap policy if I want to call it that. Never mind critical race theory. And this is the mindset that I encourage everyone to have. Stop speaking what they want us to say. It's like Fox News calls it critical race theory, and then they call it equity. I just call it the complete and utter waste of taxpayer money policy. Because that's what it is. I said to our school superintendent, I met him a few weeks ago as a new superintendent, and I said, even if you take the policy debate out of it for a minute, just whether you're for it or against it, this garbage, I said, where's the ROI to taxpayers, the return on investment? If school district A has this garbage and school district B doesn't, does that mean that therefore graduates from school district A are so much more prepared and ready into society? Does that mean that the school taxes that have gone up to pay for all of the costs of this program show a return on investment? Or is it just a feel-good political program for the Democrats on the school board? Well, he couldn't answer the question. Because there is no ROI. You know, we need teachers to teach history, maths, science, economics. We need bus drivers to drive buses. Do we need, because this isn't, you know, private corporations, businesses, if they want to go put in these positions in, my tax dollars aren't involved. I'm not paying for it. You're not paying for it. As far as I'm concerned, do what they want if they want to waste their money. But when we're talking about public schools, every dollar spent should only be spent because it's essential to spend. Not $1 of any of this stuff is essential to spend. Nobody can explain how there is any return on investment for this money. It is purely political money. And when you think about how to oppose this, think about it in those terms. When you say to school board directors, what can you do? Find a school district that doesn't have it. Like, there's one in Montgomery County. I heard a story that the school board president in Montgomery County, there's a Souderton area, said, just looked at it like, we're not putting a director of equity in because it's a waste of money. And I mean, his analysis went no further than that. And I was like, yeah. Like, it's really that simple when you think about it, isn't it? It's that simple. Why would you spend our director of political indoctrination, $142,000 a year salary, plus healthcare, plus pension, plus the support staff, you're probably $250,000 in the school budget. Necessary or not necessary? So there's so many different ways that one can oppose what they're doing, whether it's in terms of the actual debate, should this be happening, but even in terms of just should the money be spent. That's a great point to make. That none of these elected officials can answer. You go to one of these people and say, what is the ROI? Show me the graph from the analysis compared to a district that doesn't have it. They'll go running for the hills, they'll go higher. Because they can't, right? So I think that the most important thing in terms of fighting back is to not accept the idea that we have to speak the way that they want us to speak. That's so, because that gets to this issue of the First Amendment, you know? And because the left, they grew up on this book from 1970s called Rules for Radicals. Some of you may have, and it's a whole litany of how to affect societal change through being radical. And I take the view that in peaceful ways, we need to be more radical with our speech. We need to start saying things how they are. I refuse to call it DEI. I simply won't call it that. So when someone asks me a question about it, I go, that's just crap. And you know, the way to do it is to make a right to know request of your school district. Say, please send me the sample reading list for all teachers and then call it their name for the request for your DEI program. A sample reading list, right? You get a hold of the books. I got some books from my school district. You read some of these books, and to Jarrett's point before, it doesn't matter whether there's a CRT curriculum. You see this garbage in the books. You just say, that's garbage, that's crap. One of the books that was put into Pensbury was a book called Something Happened in This Town, which is a foul book aimed at 5 to 8 year old children that was literally teachers, got dark images on it, and it literally teaches children to hate police officers, that police officers like to shoot people because they're black. In this book, okay? And I read it at a school board meeting. And you know, one of the local cops in my town came up to me at wow, I was like, well, you totally support what you're saying, this is outrageous. So the way that you deal with this is you get a copy of the books from the sample list, and then you just say, this is race-baiting, vile, divisive, waste of taxpayer money, and it shouldn't be happening, rather than getting into a highbrow discussion, because it's a very, very simple discussion. I said at the school board meeting, this book, 5 to 8 year old kids, 5 to 8 year old kids, and this is what I said at this meeting, play in the sandbox together. Do you know what I mean? They don't sit there when you're that age and look and see skin color. They're too busy building sandcastles. You know what I mean? And then it comes the government, and the government gets in the middle of that sandcastle building exercises and then says to the white kid, you know, you're white, he's black. And the kids are like, well, no, we're just building sandcastles. But the government comes in and creates division where none would exist if the government stayed the hell out of the sandbox. We had a junior in the high school speak at the Pensbury School Board meeting in August, and it was great because the director of the political indoctrination program, you see how I'm calling it my language? I don't do that. The director of the political indoctrination program was on the side of the podium. High school student, public comment speaks, and he starts saying stuff like, you know, this political indoctrination program is like, we don't, on the football team, he was like, you know, we're too busy figuring out how to beat the neighboring high school they've been competitors with for the last 20 years in the next game. We don't like even consider like what skin color anyone is on the football team. We're too busy playing football. And he literally said it to her. She's looking at it, she was like, oh my God. Like this, right? Because what do you do when a student comes up and says that, when you're the director of the political indoctrination program, being called out by a high school student? And everywhere I go, I encourage people, like, find students that oppose stuff and tell them to go to public comment, because there's nothing more powerful than a student speaking at public comment to a school board saying, what the hell are you doing? What are you doing? And that's something that I think that all of us should do, is to encourage our young people to exercise their First Amendment rights outside of the school classroom, go to school board meetings, go on Facebook, and oppose what your own school district's doing. Because most students, I put it to you, have no interest in this. Why would they? I mean, you know, kids want to go to school to learn and make friends. They want to go to learn to hate each other, be divided. This is the oppressed group, this is the oppressor. That's not why our kids go to school. This is being pushed on them from above. And these positions, the director of political indoctrination positions, the left are putting them in one at a time. They go around every school district, right? These positions never used to exist, right? And then they're just going around the state, going around the country. We need to spend $150,000 salary on this position in this school district. Then the neighboring school district says, well, we better have one. And the way to deal with it, it stops at the local level. You stop it in your local school district, yours. You know, everyone talks about national politics, everyone watches TV 2 hours of national politics, and I always say to folks, you can affect change right now in your backyard. You go to your school board meeting, you take a video camera if they don't film it, and you film them. And you challenge them, and you run school board candidates against them, and you kick these people out of office. That's what has to happen. They have to be defeated and thrown out of office for this stuff, okay? Because at the end of the day, it is just foundationally un-American what they're doing. They're teaching young people to hate America. They're teaching young people to hate the police. They're teaching, you know, very often I think kids to be divided from their own parents. This is their agenda. If they can control young minds, they can chart this country on a whole new course that is dark and sinister. And you know, when I was growing up in England, my favorite president was Ronald Reagan, because I just, every time that you saw Reagan, particularly on these state visits when he would go abroad, he was always beaming. There's a big smile. I remember thinking when I was a kid growing up, wow, America's this great place. Look at this president. He's got a cowboy hat, he's smiling, he's there with my favorite, you know, Margaret Thatcher, my favorite British Prime Minister. It's a great country. What are our kids learning today? Does the President of America today do that? No. You know, the left is saying America's a bad country. It should be ashamed of itself. The hell with that. This is the greatest country in the world. There's nowhere else like this country. And I've had it with the left trying to teach our kids that it isn't. Yes, it is. Every country has a history. For goodness sake, in England we have kings and queens chopping people's heads off for hundreds of years. You know, we teach it. All history should be taught. Good, bad, and the ugly. But this idea of dividing people based on skin color in particular. And by the way, you know how they like to say, well, it's about inclusion. The only thing that this indoctrination program is about is skin color. They don't go on about, you know, sexual orientation, this other stuff. It's all about skin color. That's it. So when they're even in their own messed up world, it isn't inclusion, it's one issue, race. And so they want to divide this country by race, and not just divide this country, they want people to be ashamed if we disagree with them. Not just ashamed, they want us shut up, silenced, and intimidated. And it is incumbent upon all of us to not be so. To not be so, you know. This is, we live in a constitutional republic for a reason. One of the things that annoys me is when I hear young people say that we live in a democracy in the United States. No, we don't. No, we don't. Nobody pledges allegiance to the democracy of the United States. We pledge allegiance to the republic for a reason. It's a constitutional republic with certain democratic principles in place, but it's not a pure democracy. In a pure democracy is two wolves and a lamb voting on what to eat for lunch. That's democracy. Liberty is a well-armed lamb who can test the vote. And this is the system that we have in the United States of America. The government, and the government, I use that term loosely, not just federal government, a school board is a government. 9 of them, right? It's a government entity. The government, federal, local, state, cannot do anything it wants. You can do that in a pure democracy. 51% of members of parliament in the UK pass a law saying, you know, we're going to restrict free speech. That's the law. If they tried that in Congress here, guess what? It goes to court. Because there's the lamb saying you're not allowed to do that in this country. But a law can be a law, maybe, in America. You know, because there's a third co-equal branch, the judicial branch, which, to the point earlier, we've got to elect good judges, constitutional judges. And that's what's happened while we sued Pensbury. They said you have to shut up, sit down, be quiet, you can't speak at public comment. And we said, we're going to sue you. We're going to go to the federal judiciary and ask for a court order to declare your public comment policy to be unconstitutional. The fact that 9 of you all voted and approved it, and you think you have the power through your policy to silence people, well, guess what? We're going to go to court and assert our constitutional rights because there's a higher law called the United States Constitution, you know? And when you act, and all of us as individuals take that on board, we live in a republic, there's a higher law, the First Amendment. When I spoke in June at the meeting that went viral on video, the solicitor tried to intimidate me into silence, and I quoted constitutional case law to him, New York Times versus Sullivan, which is a famous First Amendment case, that literally says, the Supreme Court in that decision, 1964 case, said, it's not only our right to speak to government officials, we don't have to be nice to them. You know, we don't have to be pleasant. We don't have to speak to them in deferential ways. At that school board meeting, I referred to the school board president as Benito Mussolini. I was like, you know, Mussolini, you don't have the right to make me be quiet. The school solicitor said that was a violation of the policy because I was insulting the school board president. Well, of course I'm insulting her. She's a fascist. But in their world, me insulting a government official, calling her a fascist, isn't allowed. And I was just like, it sure as hell is. You know, maybe you can't go live in Russia and call Putin a fascist. You disappear pretty quick. You can't go to North Korea and do it. But in this country, you sure as hell can. And I sure as hell will. So what happened is the school solicitor went quiet after I said that. Because he was trying to impose his policy, the government's law, on top of my right to speak. And I just hit him back with the First Amendment to the Constitution. And so all of you need to remember that. If you go to school board meetings and they say be quiet, you say, no, I won't be quiet. You stop putting this garbage in the kids' classrooms and stop making me pay for it. Right? And so that's kind of my attitude. I think that, you know, as Americans, we have to, the left have a nasty attitude. And, you know, and in peaceful ways, we need to get a much tougher attitude with these people. We need to say, no. You don't tell us to be quiet. You don't get to call me a racist. You don't even know me. Enough of it. I'm done with this. So anyway, that's my little blurb. I hope you have Q&As because there's a lot of stuff in my head that comes out. So thank you very much for your time.
Okay, at this point we're going to do question and answers. And these ladies here, if you raise your hand, they'll give you paper, pencil. You can put your question down and we'll ask. In the meantime, I have a few here. Are all schools in this area teaching critical race? I think you kind of went over that.
Yeah, I think we have to watch. I think you have to watch. It's a common pitfall and something to avoid. Is to make the claim that, you know, a lot of the times opponents or supporters of critical race theory, they'll try to tell you that it's not being taught. And we have to be clear that they're not teaching critical race theory 101. It's not, the college course is not being taught in school, but they're teaching tenets of Marxism, which is, you know, which CRT is repackaged Marxism, essentially. So just be clear on that. But I only know about Parkland. That's because we started digging and we've exposed, you know, that in Parkland.
Can you potentially be considered a terrorist if you speak out about CRT? Is this true?
That's what Joe Biden wants everyone to believe, isn't it? That's the whole point of that letter. That the DOJ's memorandum was specifically designed to intimidate and chill ordinary citizens into not exercising their First Amendment rights. It's absolutely horrific that they issued that public memorandum. I mean, nobody condones violence at school board meetings. Nobody, if there's any issue like that, then local law enforcement can handle it. I've never seen a situation where you know, if some convenience stores report alleged suspected criminal activity, therefore the Department of Justice issues a national referendum saying anyone that goes to a convenience store is going to be monitored. I mean, it's unheard of. The unspoken agenda of Biden's administration is to intimidate people from exercising their First Amendment rights to speak, because they use words like you can't harass or well, these are vague legal terms. I mean, technically speaking, they could say I was harassing the school board president, calling him Mussolini, right? So in theory, the FBI could be investigating me. Now, I know it's constitutionally protected speech, and I'm sort of out there and a little bit of a pit bull with my attitude, but maybe not everyone's that way, and maybe some people say, I don't want to speak, I don't want to risk, you know, federal law enforcement. There's absolutely, in my mind, they should all be in jail for issuing that memorandum. There should be an investigation if anyone had anything to do with the chilling of American citizens. That whole thing just sets me off. So.
Okay, some of these are, they've already been answered, but in the Gateway Pundit October 16th, 18th article, PS School Board Association votes unanimously to end membership with National School Board Association over Biden's letter for parents, which was brought up, to be classified as domestic terrorists. 16 states have disassociated from this. Is this really good news, or is each district still moving forward to teach CRT?
The group that sent this letter to Biden, the NSBA, National School Boards Association, the national mothership of State School Boards Association. In Pennsylvania, we have PSBA, which for those of you that don't know, it stands for Pretty Stupid, Blindingly Awful, since that's exactly what they are. PSBA are a self-serving, taxpayer-funded special interest group, just as bad as the teachers' union, okay? And the fact that they are disassociating themselves from this letter that NSBA, the mothership, sent out, is purely self-serving. It is a PR stunt, because what's happening is, there's no doubt in my mind, that local school boards around Pennsylvania are calling them up, giving them heat, saying, because of that letter, because of Biden's, chilling of the speech, we've got all these problems. School districts all over Pennsylvania fund PSBA. Now, I've been lobbying for years, they should all fire PSBA, because they're a waste of time and a waste of taxpayer money. But when PSBA is looking at 500 members, and a lot of them are unhappy with NSBA, PSBA makes the business decision, let's get out of NSBA to protect our financial interests. PSBA is about PSBA. Do you know they're all in PESAs, the Public School Employee Retirement System? It's a private corporation. They're all in PESAs. PSBA's own employees are in the school pension plan like school teachers. It's a racket. I could do a whole hour on PSBA. So.
Simon, do you say that a time limit on speech at school board meetings is unconstitutional, or just the content of what is said?
School boards can, according to case law, put in certain restrictions. One of them is a time limit, so they can do that. The courts have upheld that, which I guess in some sense makes sense. You can't go down there, 100 people and say, I want to talk to you for half an hour. So they can put in place time restraints. At Pensbury, we're 5 minutes. Some school districts are very anti-transparency, bring it down to 2 minutes. And if your school district's one of them, complain, vote them out of office, and put in place a sensible one that is at least 5 minutes. There was a second part of the question.
Or just the
content, yeah, they can. This is a little bit of a grey area. They can put in place a regulation that says you're only supposed to speak on items on the agenda, so items that the school board are voting on that night. They can, in theory, restrict your speech to the issues that they're voting on. Some school districts split public comment policy to have agenda items, and then afterwards they have non-agenda items for people that want to speak on anything. Those that are the most anti-transparency only have agenda item issues. And those are the school boards that are typically like the 2 minute mark, and then they say you can only discuss agenda items. They can potentially get away with that. And if that's your local school district, I would absolutely complain like hell, because that is the worst attitude. Well, yeah, so here's the way to deal with it, because then there's the way that they regulate it, and then there's the how do you deal with it. My tip on that is if you are in a school district where they say you can only speak on an agenda item, look at an agenda item and maybe have 10 seconds of comment on it. So let's suppose there's an agenda item to pay the bills. You go, okay, I'm speaking on agenda item, my name's Bob, and I'm speaking on agenda item B, I'm lobbying all of you to vote yes on that to pay the bills. Now, moving tack, I want to talk about something else the rest of the time, right? And then you spend the rest of the time talking about that, because that will confuse them. They'll be like, well, wait, you were only supposed to speak on an agenda item. Yeah, I did. Now I've got something else to say. So you keep your agenda item to 10 seconds, and then you keep going, and then you'll confuse them all. I'm into guerrilla tactics.
Okay, somebody says, as I understand it, diversity is good, inclusion is good, equity is equality of outcome rather than equality of opportunity. Marxism is bad. Marxism and bad. Which one of you want to take that up?
I don't know what these terms are. There's a taxpayer-funded political indoctrination program. I don't know what this is.
Are all college students being taught CRT?
I don't have an answer for that. I'm concerned about the high school right now in the Parkland School District. Yeah, I'm not researching that.
How does or why isn't GOP vetting candidates? Rhino's running November 3rd. They're driving
Which county are you
CRT.
asking about? Who asked that question?
Who asked that question?
Lehigh County, I know. Yeah.
Parents are indoctrinated. How do we wake the woke? How do we wake the woke? Can we?
Here, I have a longer thing. Well, long story short, the school bus stop is in front of my house. So I talked to some parents. One of them said slavery still exists, and she knows a couple slaves. When I asked who they were, because I wanted to report, because it's illegal, she shut up. And the other guy, these are educated, college-educated people. One was in his 30s, said that 1619 is just an interpretation of history. That's what scares me, is that these people, how are we going to get to the kids that are being indoctrinated in the school when the parents are indoctrinated? That's what concerns me as a parent.
Well, there's 1619 and there's 1620. And then there's 1776.
I'm just saying that, like,
Yeah.
the thing is, you know.
Do either of you have an answer to that?
I mean, I would say that we try to put candidates in that can go in and then expose them from within where we don't need information requests and make it so uncomfortable for the other board members by speaking up against it that it becomes an issue. I mean, boards show up to the board meetings. We're doing that. We're showing up. We're talking to people, and people just have to wake up. I think people are they're asking people in the school district what's going on, and they're just being taught. The administration at Parkland was given guidance on how to deal with conflict mitigation. They're betting, and they're being told that if they just deflect, that the news cycle will pass and we will give up. They're being taught this. They are. I mean, when I talk to them at a school board meeting and I start speaking to them about this, immediately their heads go down. They stare at the desk when you talk to them. They're very submissive. They know it's there. But they're banking on their training, which is telling them that eventually we will get tired, run out of money, or just give up. But I don't think we'll do that. I think it'll keep growing. So.
Dave, are you timing me on? Somebody time me. Panorama and DOG Garland, how can we find out if any of our schools are using it and other data collection methods? Who is working on the uncovering of conflict of interest of Merrick and Garland?
Well, I don't know who's working on him particularly, but the way you can uncover what they're ordering is to make right-to-know requests. I'm very familiar with Pennsylvania's right-to-know law, and I encourage everybody to use it, because that's how you find out. Remember, it's not the title. What books are going in the classrooms? Okay, so a simple right-to-know request is, send me a copy of the sample reading list that is being utilized as part of your, I will say it one time, diversity, equity, inclusion program, but only because it has to go in the request, right? When you make a right-to-know request, you have to use words that they understand, but if it's not in a right-to-know request, I won't use it. But that's a simple request. And you know, send me a copy of all of the invoices that you receive from any company that supplies the district with books pertaining to your program. Curriculum. Yes. So you can then look up who the owners of these companies are. So that's one way you can. The right to know law is a really, really good tool to get information about your local school district, because they're all going to vary a little bit. And to the earlier question was, how do you know if CRT is being taught? It's a very simple thing. Either your school district has a position called Director of Equity, their words, or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, are they looking at getting one? Because if you've got one, you have it, right? Because that's all these people do is sit around. And by the way, the lady that does it at Pensbury, she actually has a private consulting business. She contracts her services to other neighboring school districts that she profits from, like a consultant for this garbage, whilst working full-time on the taxpayers' dime in my school district. She even does it on taxpayer time. We've got a very controversial figure that's like an area beacon for this garbage around Pennsylvania. So, right to know requests are the way that you expose conflicts of interest, okay?
And if I could color that locally to Parkland, I probably submitted 12 right to know requests, so much that the last meeting, the board president, a Republican on paper, but I'm not sure about his values, is hoping that they pass legislation to reduce redundant and nuanced right to know requests. To color this a little further, out of probably the 13 right to know requests I have filed, I've received one. Every single time I file one, they send it to a full legal review at the solicitor, 30-day review process. When I met with the superintendent said, well, you're costing us a lot of money. I said, no. You could just give me what I'm asking for. You don't have to send it to the lawyer. But why are they sending it to, I'm just saying that to paint this picture, it's very easy to do, as Simon said, but I'm having a lot of resistance, and it seems a little bit odd of how much resistance I'm having. And the one that I just appealed with the state is specific to on asking how the school district in Parkland received its COVID-19 guidance from St. Luke's and Lehigh Valley. Were they drafting COVID policy for the school districts? And that's at a state appeals level now. So hopefully we'll get some answers.
It's happening in Easton too. Are all schools in this area teaching critical race? Are the school districts getting funds to teach this, or will they be made to do this? And then explain laws about infrastructure in detail, but I don't know if we have time.
I mean, I can tell you about Parkland. Parkland, it's certainly in Parkland. I know that Southern Lehigh's fighting like heck to keep it out. Wilson, I can just tell you that it's certainly in Parkland. The funding, they paid Ken Shelton out of an Idea B grant, which is for students with disabilities and handicaps. And they said it was professional development. This is what the solicitor is telling us. So we have just asked for a right to know request on the funding application. But as I told the solicitor, you may argue that that funding and Idea B is for disadvantaged and handicapped children, and that you can use this as professional development, but I think even though it may be legal, it's wrong. So.
Parkland and Northampton have the same solicitor. He made a comment at an NASD board meeting in August saying parents don't have a choice. They don't get to have a choice. Is it fair to assume that everything going on in Parkland is also happening in Northampton?
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think that Parkland's engaging in a cover-up is essentially what I believe is going on. I can't speak to Steve, Solicitor Miller, and what he's doing in Northampton, but the only thing that I can guess is that they're in a situation where they're trying to cover their tracks and deflect everything. So I don't know about what's going on in Northampton. But.
We have two more here. Have you encountered a school board who claims they don't have a say on curriculum? Ours isn't allowed to select its own policies that the administration
Parkland
handles.
School Board says there's no CRT. The school board, literally, they look at me, the president of the board, David Hine, he's a Republican at a Lehigh County Republican candidates meeting. He swore to everyone in the meeting, he told all of us, there is no CRT in Parkland. And if there is CRT in Parkland, I will fight like hell to get it out. So at the next board meeting, I showed him another example of a tenant of CRT. And I said, David, you just promised to fight like hell to get it out, so now fight like hell to get it out. But still, they're either oblivious, they're complicit. How long will we allow them to just say they don't know? How long can you allow them to be this negligent and derelict of their duties? I don't understand.
Just a quick follow-on to that. The policies that exist in school district, you have to understand how they get generated. Policies are enacted and voted on by school boards, right? 9 of them. They all sit together and they vote on whatever the policy is. There's all kinds of policies and all kinds of things. Public comment policy is one of them. You have 2 minutes, 5 minutes, you get invited. curriculum and other things. Most folks don't understand that school districts, you would think, okay, they create a policy with consultation with their local solicitor, right? It's not what happens. You know who writes policies as templates? Can any of you guess? PSBA, okay? Painfully stupid, blindingly awful. They write templates for school districts all over the state. If you doubt this, then go to your local school district and look up the policies section, and they'll be numbered 100s, 200s, 300s, to 900s. Then go to any other school district, and it will be exactly the same numbers, the same policy names. Maybe individual districts tweak them a little bit, but they're templates they get from PSBA. And PSBA actually has the nerve to say that their templates are copyright protected so they can maximize their revenue from selling these garbage templates, okay? So policies are written initially by PSBA, not school districts. Most school boards are just sheep that do what they're told.
We said we'd close at 8:30, we're almost there. I have one last, by what books publishers should we be aware of? What I would say to this, is it possible for you to get information on books and information to Bill so that he could get them out to people who are given their emails? Then we can disperse that. Okay, closing up here. On the ballot, I don't know. People have to understand school board members have their own personal agenda and are not there for students or parents. Well, that's for sure. We have another school board member in here, Linda Stubitz, I see. So she's, yeah, I think we're going to have to close this. I'm really sorry. We're running out of time here. But if you want to afterwards, you certainly can come up and talk to Simon or Jarrett, and they'll give you answers for you. On the ballot, on the back, it'll say, judges, do you want these judges to be continued? The answer is yes, they're all 4 Republicans. Okay, I have some gifts for Simon, and thank you very much for helping us here. Appreciate that. It's really given us an earful. Bill Roddenbaum has done a letter. It's in the back on the table. If you're interested in getting anything out to your 4 senators, please pick that up, copy it, fix it to your own particulars, and send it out. Lastly, I wanted to say before handing off to Bill is that the Hillsdale College has some really good stuff on there. They have a 1776 curriculum. You might want to go and read some of their stuff. It kind of counters the critical race theory that's going on, which is so divisive and makes America look, they look at America as really bad. We know it's not. We know our founding principles are good. And with that, thank you all for coming. I pass it on to Bill. Oh, just a moment. Jarrett has something real quick to say.
I just want to arm you with something. I can give you data. The data we do have. And this goes a little bit back to what Simon said about the ROI, but what was the net benefit to students to even begin to say, was there a problem? The data that I've received from multiple organizations shows that the most underperforming students in any school district is predicated on their poverty. It is irrespective of race, and that is important, and that is hard, that is not subjective, that is objective data, and we have to stick to that. Thanks.
First, I'd like to thank these 2 men for coming here and speaking to us. It's a lot of information, all right? When you get this type of information, where do you go from here? It's the important stuff. How do you activate it? And what we're doing, we got your emails. We are going to be doing a membership meeting soon, and we're going to invite you all to come be part of the membership of combating this. And Simon didn't tell you, but him and I talked before about we need to form in each school district, basically, we need to take, how many? 10 school districts back in the eastern PA, you said? Well, I believe we can do more than that. And once we get each district organized in our area, we're going to bring Simon back up to teach us how to activate and do these things. Because him and I talked about this at the last time when we met. And I want to know what we can do and how we can take action. I believe critical race theory is election integrity. Our organization feels it's part of election integrity. Because you indoctrinate students for another 5 years, we're way behind the 8 ball already. We don't have time. We need to talk to our neighbors. We need to talk to our friends. We need to get activated. And we don't need to silence our people. We need our people's voices. We got to communicate together. We got to participate with one another. Not downgrade our thoughts. We don't control thoughts. We don't fight with one another. We support one another. I know how to do these type of things because I've done it worldwide in other organizations. Okay? And with the Pennsylvania election integrity, we are going to have a meeting soon. We're going to let you know when it is, and we're inviting you to come, and we want your voice to be involved with us. We're not here to be in competition with any organization. If you want to stay with organizations, that's your choice, and great. No problem. We're not here to compete. We're here to work with one another. We're here to learn to work together better, and we're here to win this thing. This is a war, and you got to look at it. It's a battle we're in, and it's for, people want to say it's for our hearts, it's for our conscience, it's for our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. We're in fact. I watched my granddaughter last year on Zoom, and I watched a school district in this area teach without books. And I listened to their teachers, and I was appalled. I couldn't say a word because I want to debate these men and these women that are teaching my granddaughter. That's what's activated me. When they sold the election, it activated me. So I want to thank you. If you didn't sign in, please sign in. Get them petitions from Bill. Okay, got them back there. You got to take 4 of them because there's 4 different ones. Okay, and ask these 2 men questions and get together with one another. Thank you. God bless you.